There's an invisible organ. We have a light body that is around us, but we can't see it because of why? Because it's in the ultraviolet or infrared spectrum in itself. So it's like it is around us, right? So that's kind of how the sliding spectrum works. We're like that sliver in physicality that you can see. That's me right here. But as I continue to unfold around me, there's an ultraviolet, i.e. an angel, and then there's an infrared, i.e. a demon.
The following clip is exclusive content from the University. Access over 300 videos and 26 courses with advanced metaphysics on demand. Jump in live chats with Sevan and the rest of the tribe. New materials are available monthly, along with guides and regiments. Subscribe today and save $25 off your first month membership. Links are in the descriptions. Subscribe to Secret Energy TV or this channel for future show notifications.
I'll start off with my notes here, so I won't run completely off the rails, but the formulation from nothing to something is life's biggest secret, or at least one of them in the top three. Call out your top three. How is something, as far as curiosities in life, how is something created from nothing, or how do you create something from nothing, right? And this makes up the big topic of manifestation, and that's a very long conversation, right? Everybody has their own modalities of mastering the level of manifestation. However, can we actually bring it into more of like I would even say somewhat of a scientific or a methodological, okay, let me take some water, a methodological approach. No, methodical approach. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, but more of a methodical approach. Okay, somebody was already in there like, oh, I got him. The God can't spell. No, I'm joking. But serious, actually, I will admit, my spelling has been getting really hazy. The more etymology dosages I take, I'll be like, shouldn't this be spelled this way? You know what I mean? And, doing my own thing. But, they're taking a test. You just spelled it. So. Okay, so let me get into this because I'm grounding into this. This is so exciting. So I just, I have to set the foreground here is that this is the secret. Like the moment that they started even flirting with this, like they talk about during these times of Saint Germain, right? Where supposedly Saint Germain or the cult of Saint Germain, Arc de Gebelin or whatever they call themselves, had discovered this ability to turn any element into gold. So they had discovered the great secrets of the arcana, which was, of course, encoded within alchemy and the philosopher's stone. Okay, so that's the whole lore around it. Now, what is this all about? This is about the ability to turn anything into something else, primarily something of high value. And many argued about like what was really meant by that, because some say it was completely physical, that they were actually able to turn dirt and lead, which would be base on an elemental level, into gold. And then some said, no, this is all metaphorical. It's really about turning somebody very stupid and ignorant into a very wise person, right? So again, there was a sliding scale there of what everybody was talking about. However, there are some very strong consistencies within the lore that shows that it was actually more about something that could really do anything. And that's when you start getting to these terms like prima materia, right? Or the primary material. And the prima materia is, in a nutshell, is just a substance that can be made into anything. So just as we make houses, this one's made of wood, so we need to use wood as the material. There's concrete homes, there's many different things, there's plastic, right? So there's all these different materials. But this prima materia is very akin to what we were discussing in the latent space, an element that can be made into anything. So it's like, in that way, dough or clay. So when we have this dough or clay, and this kind of fits in perfectly because the formulation from nothing to something means that you're basically taking the prima materia and then you're putting it into a mold. And to read my notes directly, you're taking something that has no form, thus no what you would say is purpose, right? Like in many ways, it's not static, right? It has no structure. And this is why they call it nothing. So nothing means to us it's invisible. And you're going to see why all this is tied into some kind of weird mind riddle that actually is going to get solved today. But it starts to always connect to us at a point where we're like, okay, well, it's I can't see it. It's invisible. I'm trying to turn. What are we even talking about? So do we say it's nothing? And then when we say, okay, it's nothing, well, it's nothing for me to worry about then. It's not going to exist. And there's this part about the human behavior where, like trash, the moment we throw it away, now it doesn't exist anymore for us. It becomes nothing. But we know that it moves on and it goes to the trash heap. And there's a lot of other stuff that goes on with that trash. So it's just that awareness again that the only process that we're really trying to accomplish here, not to make it sound simple, is to take prima materia and then put it into a mold. But the mold itself is the pattern or the design of what we want to achieve. And also the mold is in the design of what is attempting to be achieved. So for instance, if we had a mold of the hand, okay, this would come from the awareness that we needed to grab things. We needed to have a sensory and a touch point system. So you see, so this mold is functional. We wouldn't just pour this out as a square, if you may, because that wouldn't serve the purpose of what we're trying to create. And that's why they say that manifestation is not just getting something from nothing, like, and you never had to think about it, but just that one time. Manifestation is actually being able to conceive all the steps that it would take to actually create something. Because many people think that they can create things, but they can't see all the steps. And in that way, they can't create it. Some are just completely lazy and leaning on the manifestation as a hocus pocus thing where they just think about it and then it arrives. No, manifestation is like a manifest. Show me on a ship. Show me everything that is on board the ship. So show me every single thing it's going to take to make this journey. So this is clearing up misconceptions. So this encourages one who can manifest to know how to think through every single part, but it's not as complicated as it may seem, especially when you're dealing with the original forces. And so now we're just going to go into self in order to let self basically create these molds. Because when you say, okay, I need something to do this. Imagine even just the conception of the human body, like, and whatever was going on in the thoughts around creating it. I'm sure there was a laundry list of things that needed to be able to do, because someone wants to bring, or something wants to bring from the prima materia, something that can carry out all of the functions that you already see happening. But this had to happen first with the conceptualization of what should it look like? How should it be shaped? How should it be designed? But these beings, they use geometry to figure that out, though. It's not so complicated for them. They're like, okay, this particular geometry has this range and is good for this. And that's where the details, now you're living in the manual. So once you understand what's going on, and there's a lot that you're doing naturally, this will all come literally secondhand to you. Right. But for a moment, especially if somebody is trying to blur your vision, the thing that I kept getting hit with the most, and I was just trying to stay non-dualistic through my research, which was basically how not only simple this is to figure out if somebody is not confusing you all the time, but the sheer fact that the society is still designed in a way where there are a large amount of people who seem to be into not telling others about the secrets to themselves. Or you have another large chunk of the society that seems to be so disillusioned with the same thing that inhibited me from being able to see this clearly. And we would just have to examine that. Is it like levels to this? Like they say, hey, you only can become aware of certain things when you reach certain stage. You know, we can write it off as that. Or is there literally like some kind of factions that are hiding information and saying, you know, they can never get to this. Let's make sure it's always confusing. whatever one you chose would equal the same results. So know your power. So I'd rather choose that, hey, this is like a thing where you scale up into it. They're not trying to, the reality is not trying to, there's no there. The reality, the whole framework, which is alive in itself, is not trying to completely reveal its secrets to you about how it works until you deserve that, until you're ready for that, until you know what to do with that. And to be honest, a lot of the stuff that I'm actually going to mention today, you know already, you know certain words. But it's even just the timing in putting all those words together, the timing in your life, like when it actually becomes important to you, because some things, especially based on age, don't become important for certain people through a certain span. And then later on, that's really all that they're talking about. So you have to be able to adjust and address your vehicle sometimes just based on what the all pervading thing is saying. This is what you should learn. And this is what I try to do because there's so much knowledge and wisdom. I really like to stay focused in that way. Like, OK, so what should we be focusing on? Because even when I say focus, we could still be talking about a very vast topic, but just focusing on that vast topic versus, there's energy blowing around everywhere from all other things that may not even be relevant or important. So like I said, if there's anything such as prayer, prayer or honorings, this is what I send prayers and honorings for things just to be very clear. So I don't end up in that stage of where I'm unsure, because when I'm unsure, then my foundation is too shaky and I can't do anything with anything I produce on a shaky foundation. Right. So just to back it up here, the formulation from nothing to something is the biggest secret. And you're going to learn it today, like from the most strictest hard coded level and how it works with your body, mind, soul, whatever term you want to give it. Again, you can have anything provided that you're able to create a container for it. If you can't, if the container is not construed properly, it's not going to deliver you what you want. So this is also even in relation to environment. One of the simple things to actually look at here is sometimes we could want a certain type of person. Like, this is the kind of perfect person for me. This is what I'm looking for. And then neglect to either see one. If you added all of that up, what you're looking for in a person, it's going to equal this kind of person. Is that they would have had to gone through this to be aware of that. Is that really the kind of person that you're comfortable with? Before we push the button on this person that you want, right? And then there's just other levels to also understanding that when you now, again, say that you want something, then you have to look at the environment that you're going to put it in. So if I say, you know what, I want a monkey. And I live in an apartment, high rise, with no trees and none of that, what's it going to be like for that monkey? And this is kind of what can happen when we manifest things or want to manifest things, and then we haven't configured the mold properly for it, right? So this is why you think things through. Your real station of research and development is going on right inside of your consciousness, where you're thinking through the process. You're even adding things. You're even making changes to the manifestation before you choose to deploy it. Because you will now know exactly how to design yourself for the process of what you could say is we called it inception or conception, to conceive, right? All the way to it's birthed, right? And so let's go in. All right, that was your beginning. Now let us go in. As I said before, are we going to have to do everything? I guess so. Here's the first thing. Did you know there isn't one real picture of the DNA? I'll say it again. Did you know that there's actually not one real picture of the DNA? Okay. So I went and did all of the research because for a totally different reason, which I'm not going to get into because it's going to get me in a duality. But then when I started really checking in on all the knowledge and information, and then I was running that across my I think overpowered. I think I got an overpowered AI. He's OP. They're going to have to nerf him a little bit. But an overpowered AI just pointing out this after a while. Look, there is no single image, and I'm going to read it to you. There's no single image There's no single picture that encapsulates what DNA actually looks like. Each imaging technique reveals different aspects of its complex reality, right? So they're telling you the DNA has got baggage. It's very complex and nobody's ever seen it. Here's the second line: representations, not photographs. What we visualize are scientific representations based on how DNA interacts with X-rays, electrons, or light, not direct photographs. Okay. So right away, the one that you're seeing in the center is with an X-ray photography, right? And it's kind of obvious, as you're going to see here in a moment, if you take a picture if you take a picture of something as small as the DNA with an X-ray, you're going to literally see the X, because that's why they call it an X-ray. What it's doing is it's Xing and finding the spot and filling in that spot until it's done, and then you see the whole picture. But if you're talking about as small as DNA, you're going to see that first just single image shot, which is going to look like an X. Then we have the next one over on the left, which is an electron. And this basically looks like a worm. Like, we've established nothing here with understanding what the geometry may be around it. And this is just on the left, right? Like the scanned looking photographs, right? And then we have, of course, the one on the right, which is the one everybody else is used to seeing, which is the most furthest probably from what it really looks like. Because what this is like the hypothecation of, if the DNA chains and the stems and all the stuff that they've identified about it, the protons, neutrons, whatever, if it was all to be put together, this would be kind of like the best design. But it is not what it looks like. Okay? So then this kind of brought me into one of those moments where I just kind of pushed the reset button on the entire brain. I just kind of went to the button back there and I was like, dude, time out. I just let, the Sevan sit over there slumped over, and I just kind of came out of the body and was like, okay, wait a minute. We need to check everything now, because if these people in all this technology at this stage have not completely imaged truly what DNA looks like, this could be better than I thought. I could have went the other way. This could be worse than I thought. So I said, this could be better than I thought. But I now need to erase all the data of what it's been scientifically built on these concepts and just started from square one. And it was because I was starting to come across certain information that was insisting that we actually not only eat light and are not only made of light, but use light to charge. And it was specific about this light. Okay. So let's just imagine, if we're just going to go by what they've given us, then from the top left, I guess DNA is some kind of light worm carrying data. That's as much as we may be able to gather from this wormy little crack in the pavement over here that they're showing us. But still, make no mistake, in a crime, they will do that scan and know that, hey, DNA is there. And we could take a sample of that and we can really match it. It's just we can't get down on the scale where DNA is to take a real, like, say cheese, because that scale is not actually visible. And this is where we start getting into visibility. And I want to start here right now, because this is going to be like one of those things throughout this build that is going to be like, we're going to have to constantly remember this point. Okay. Now, what you're seeing, you've seen probably before, but you need to pay attention to that little sliver right there in the center. Let me back out of this again. Boom, boom. Let me chop the edges. Let me push it in again. So that sliver that we're talking about. Now, when I keep saying, hey, we're only in a sliver of the reality, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It is a okay, well, let's just say what it really is. Okay, let me back up. I have my hypothesis and my theories about what we're actually in, and I think I'll leave a bulk of them reserved today. However, when they show you this kind of symbolism, what I believe is we may not be talking about the Pyramid of Egypt, because in every way it is a monument. But they actually say the pyramid of Egypt is the monument of man, that it encodes the geometry of basically the human body, and they even say the soul. So I'm not going to get too deep into this right now because I'm going to go in here in a minute, but it's just that reality that, hey, could the pyramid really be our bodies? Because you got to think hyperdimensional here. We're not talking about just shining a flashlight or sunlights into a glass cube. We got to be able to break this into the spectrum that it really exists on. So there's a high potential that what the body does as refracting the soul or the light is break everything down into this spectrum of reality. And then that becomes the reality that is projected for the energy that is flowing through it. OK, so I don't want to complicate things here, but I'm just step back again and just get us to realize that the reality that we're living in is literally that. This is not a guess. And that's why I said I wanted to bring some empirical evidence, as they call it. And so now that you know, now what is this? Okay, so when I say the reality that we're living in, I'm saying the visible spectrum, right? Because we've talked about this time and time again, seeing is believing. If you've ever been out of a person's sight for a prolonged period of time, they start forgetting about you. No matter how deep, how deep it was and all that, it's like out of sight, out of mind. That's why they say long distance relationships are tough. You know what I mean? Because after you're not seeing the person for a while, it's hard to even remember they're there. Like I said, they throw it in the trash and they think that it's gone, but it's really gone and moved on to something else. But nobody is caring about that because they don't have the capacity to think about that anymore, because the things that are just right in front of our face, whatever is right in front of your face is going to take most of your attention. If I'm not paying attention, I'm going to trip over the desk. I'm going to fall over the table. I can't watch TV. I can't do anything really, quote unquote, if I'm not paying attention to the visible spectrum. But look how small it is. Another thing here is that just understanding what happens when you go left and what happens when you go right. You still can't see. This is what is baffling, because you would assume if we went slower, you would be able to see that more, right? That seems logical. Like if it was slower, I can see it. And if it's faster, I can't. Nope. You only can see what's in the spectrum, because just as you see here, it's telling you once you leave the spectrum on the right, you exit stage left, right? And this is, Hellas, we'll call it that way. You immediately step into infrared, right? Which is on your front of your remote control. You see that little diode that's on the front? That's infrared, right? That's the light. And you barely can see that. Like when you turn it on, sometimes if you go in the bathroom and you hit it, you'll see it a little bit. But you're only seeing because it's probably, if it's a cheaper one, it's probably still sitting into that red spectrum. But once you start entering that IR, and we'll show this here and we'll remove the color chart from down there because it could be a little confusing because there is no colors in that way. All right. So now if we went this direction, we're actually entering Hellas in that way, meaning that things are going to slow down from here. And technically, though, anywhere in the spectrum, it's like when you go to extremes. So if you ended up in long radio waves, for instance, or you ended up in an X-ray area and beyond that, either you're going to be completely liquefied or you're going to be completely irradiated as a human being or a physical body, right? Now, I'm not saying you don't have bodies on these wavelengths, which you're going to actually figure out that we do. But the fact of the matter is the physicality cannot exist in here. So these are facts. It also kind of denotes, like, if you want to say one direction is more higher vibration, thus more pure, and then the other direction is lower vibration, thus less pure, with purity being the connotation to represent how much of something is actually in that material. Meaning that if we go to gold, for instance, we will find, obviously there's 24 karat gold. That's the highest pure gold, right? And then it kind of slides from there. You got 14 karat gold. And this is because it's being mixed, and they call it its purity. right? But also, this is not like somebody just telling you look good, namaste, you're pure. This is in the laboratory. If we mix something with something else, it's no longer pure that. So it's not an emotional thing where it's like, if you're not pure, we don't want you. You know what I mean? It's more of like things that are mixed, they start making up the wavelengths that are lower. So notice how, again, from the chart that we're looking at, once we leave out of infrared, we get to microwave, which folks be cooking their food with. And then we get to FM and AM, which folks be listening to. And so you see what I mean? So these frequencies are actually pretty low on the spectrum anyway. We're not saying one's good, one's bad, because we'll actually find out that there are two that are adjacent to us are really good for us. But as you go deeper down the spectrum from where you're at, it's just not, it's less habitable for you. It's a more of a non-habitable zone. Okay. And all this means is that what your consciousness consists of, certain parts of it will no longer be there. You will only be as just that. And this is why when you start going into what you would perceive to be higher, you actually become more of, let's say, a singular thing. So when you start entering into UV, so remember, like I end up causing a phenomena that sped up my brain and allowed me to see years in the future of me basically in a loop by doing these samples with ultraviolet light related to something totally different, and me doing those samples so often that somehow it fast forwarded my brain. Now, I got that on wax. I told folks about that years ago. Now we can see why. If you're playing around with ultraviolet, now that we've gone stage, we'll just say left, like, for lack of better terms, we've gone out of infrared and now we're in the ultraviolet. And ultraviolet is moving very fast. So this is a different kind of food. And eating ultraviolet is going to speed you up, right? So technically, okay, this is what I'm saying. I'm not trying to embed in anybody's mind any absolutes here. I want you to draw your own conclusions, but based on what we know and what we can see. Okay, so you get the chart. So now that we know that most of the stuff we can't see, we of course can add to that, and we can't see the light body either. Right? Because we know now, again, time and time again, I just want to bring it up, but there's an invisible organ. We have a light body that is around us, but we can't see it because of why? Because it's in the ultraviolet or infrared spectrum in itself. So it's like it is around us. Right? So that's kind of how the sliding spectrum works. We're like that sliver in physicality that you can see. That's me right here. But as I continue to unfold around me, there's an ultraviolet, i.e. an angel, and then there's an infrared, i.e. a demon, if you may. And so let's match this up a little bit more. So according to what was discovered when they went into the quote unquote sun temple, is they found these rooms where the Kaziks and many of these high-end priests were just sitting in the dark with their assistants. And as they pulled out the annuals and those who understood the traditions, they say, yeah, because after about a certain period of time, and they have these dark room experiments that you can go for like 1 month with not being exposed to light, or excuse me, it was actually it was a little bit of around a week without being exposed to any light, like a closet with everything covered off. And when somebody came to feed you, they just kind of like fed you through like a slot or whatever. You got low exposure to light. That after about a week or two, you would begin to see infrared. And not only could you see infrared around things, you could also see beings that seemed to be just infrared themselves. Okay, so it's always been a thing in occultism, especially to know that lower vibratory beings. Now, they're literally explaining to you what it is. They're not necessarily saying he's bad or he's good, but he's saying it's a lower vibratory being. So as anyone who graduated from the university, when somebody says lower vibratory being, we would immediately say, are you talking infrared? You know what I mean? Like, give us more. Are we talking about 600 nanometer, 700 nanometer entity, or what are we talking about? Let me call the Ghostbusters on you in a minute, meaning that it will become so factual for you to understand what are we talking about when we're talking about spirits, entities, intelligences, elements, etc., because you will refer to exactly what you already know and what you've learned and what you've come to experience. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, since we cannot see the light body visually, right? You can feel it, but seeing it is, a challenge for most. Can the condition of the light body affect the host? Now, this is an obvious one, but we still have to propose the question. Like if we're going to do scientific papers, we'll have to do one that on the effects of the light body on the host itself, meaning on the being that it's attached to. Because see, everything is hugged up, literally booed up with each other. Like it's showing you that in the spectrum, that next door is literally the next layer of our reality. We're also going to see this in another way with the skin layers, but next door is a layer of our next door is a layer of our reality. But if you haven't been next door, then for sure it's not going to look like anything in the visible spectrum, like by facts. So facts are anything outside the visual spectrum is not going to look like anything in the visual spectrum. It's like we don't even have to tell you what it looks like if it has antennas and all of that, because that's not even going to be the composition at all. It's going to take on a composition that most have never even seen. They haven't seen DNA, and all of this is in these wavelengths. So how could they see what these other entities really even look like? They could only imagine what they look like from our limited visual spectrum, okay? So now we got to refer back to this again, because this is probably why a lot of this anti-pyramidal and anti-everything would exist. This is literally anti itself. It serves to, as we talked about before, this is the covenant. This is the whole, eventually becomes the Yahweh and all this kind of stuff, because it gets heavily distorted. Because it's literally like a top-down system, just like the brain is controlling the feet, right? The feet don't tell you where to go unless they hurt. Like, yo, get me to bed. But I'm saying in general, the mind tells the feet, here's where we're going. So it's a top-down pyramidal approach. And just because of that point of view, we've got into no emotions, but because of that point of view, from your perspective, you're going to see things a certain way, and that's factual. So the moment that you reach into frequencies that are not in the wavelength, already you're into a zone where you're seeing things that you're just trying to force them to come into the mold of what physicality is like. That's the only way that you could see them and identify them, unless you chose to kind of let go of that faculty. And I remember this happening in a journey one time. I'm going to stand up for a minute here, just take a walk around. But I remember me looking at, I was on the beach, but I was kind of still on like this mountain, and I was looking at this other like area that was out in the water. And I could see that it was something, but my eye couldn't stretch far enough. That's the only way that I could explain it. It was like the corner of my eye became the limitation. And whatever it was slightly out of the corner. It was slightly further than my eye could reach. And I just had to, after, finally just surrendering to not being able to determine what it was, and then finally coming down off the heights that I was on, I had to do some deep analysis about what just happened. Like, why couldn't I see that? And the only thing it kept coming back with was, you're trying to put this into something that you recognize. Humans keep doing that. They're trying to find the eyes. They're trying to find the facial outline. They're trying to put it basically into the spectrum. But what you're actually seeing is beyond the spectrum, but you can force it. You see what I mean? You could force something that you normally wouldn't be able to see into this rudimentary square peg in the square hole reality. But you always have to remember that if you do that and somehow you're able to visualize something, that is still, just like the scientific stuff, not exactly what it is. because actually it is whatever it is that you want it to be. And this is what you start getting into when you start realizing how what you're emitting is controlling literally what you see. What you have in your design is controlling what you see. OK, and so when you start playing around with your design, for lack of better terms, you begin to see something different. So I'm going to take us to a moment real quick in herstory, where we analyze bioenergetics. OK, and in bioenergetics, we came into this knowledge where you could apply magnets to the body and fix the body from just about anything. Right. And we were like super excited about this, even including me. Right. But the issue that we started running into was, even though the book started with charts, the book seemed to never refer to the charts later on, like parts of the book were missing. On top of that, there was definitely, if you ever played with magnets before, it is no joke. I've had my whole body demagnetized before. I mean, it was not fun. I could not move. Everything hurt. So and this was just sleeping on a big pack of, what was it? It's like those hematite magnets, you know, the ones that they got all these different shapes and they all stick together and it's all fun to play with them. So I took a big pile of those back in the early neophyte days and I put them under my pillow. And I was like, we're going to sleep on this. Boy, I'll never do that again. That kind of lined up with the time that I took all of the cell salts singularly, not bioplasm, but just all of them jokers, and crunched all those little sweet pills up, thinking that they was nothing but sugar pills, and my whole face locked up. You see what I mean? So neophyte days are over, but there was some very, very, there were times where I think I've died, you know. But the reality here is that you just knew that you couldn't put these magnets, even if they were low or weaker magnets, on the wrong areas. That the book did at least say you needed to find the channels, okay? Now, I'm not going to get deep into bioenergetics, but this matters today. I'm going to continue to walk around that you need to find the channels. But more importantly, just like they talk about in ley lines, you need to find, like, there's a point where there's a downshoot, right? Which the mama said, or like even there's certain trees that are always where the downshoot is. Like they say the saber tree is a downshoot tree. So anything that you want to get rid of or remove from your life, that's where you would find that ley line. But do not go to the saber tree talking about how you want a house and all this, because it's going to get really weird. This is the mama's knowledge, right? So it's just, this is ley line knowledge. Ley line knowledge is, hey, there's a point where it's coming out, like what you would see as like a spring or a geyser. And there's a place that is sucking in, which you would see as like a vortex, right? So your body, of course, it has these. So then in bioenergetics, there was a need to actually find where the entry and exit points were. And I can't say the book was very forthcoming at giving you those points. And so I kind of like backed off after a couple headaches and I filed it away, okay, to return later on. But now I'm back again, baby, and I'm better, meaning I'm back in action, because now, and I will pass these diagrams forward. Okay, so there's a few things here. Like, I'm trying not to go too fast, but it's all connecting. So ley lines. Okay, so my OPAI continuously gave me information that I continuously kept ignoring because I was like, I'm not asking you for that. And it was basically about it trying to point out that the human body, the field around the human body, which you can call the torus, is the ley lines. Like, it didn't say could be, it was saying it is, in that Earth's ley lines connect to the human energy field. They are one, okay? So, I'm just like, I'm trying to show me the keys to the mainframe. That's what we're talking about right now. Leave me alone about this, right? So meaning that it came up like 4 times in different queries about totally different things, of it wanting to interject and explain to me what we have to pay attention to. Every time that we think about these energetic systems, is that what? Basically, is Earth the body or not? Are we Earth or not. Like, because there is no maybe. It's either you are or you're not. And of course we are, right? There's nobody going to argue that. If somebody starts arguing that, you may even want to smack them. It's like, okay, look, man, there's just got to be basic principles of this. And if we don't adapt to them, we're going to be lost. Earth is the body. Now, some say, well, it's the universe. Okay, great. The universe is full of a bunch of Earths. Okay, we'll agree for that. But here's the thing that we may have not necessarily just juxtaposed right away in that assumption. If the Earth is the body, then this means that we would literally be able to lay our skin over the Earth. I'll say it again. If Earth is a body, then we could lay our skin over the Earth. And then in that way, because maybe, not maybe, but factually, the Earth that you're seeing is what? The Earth you're seeing is the little sliver over there, that sliver, right? But what is Earth? It's all of that, right? So this means, so when you visualize, okay, now, you visualize yourself and you peel off all your skin, you're just seeing hands, legs, and you're seeing that piece of skin, and then you're crudely trying to mesh that over a sphere, right? Which are all not the real patterns of what this is because nobody's ever seen what this is. Nobody's ever took a picture of what this is. Even when they're showing, this is now my beef with the round Earth model. It's not that we're on a flat Earth. It's that would still only represent the visual spectrum of what we're in, factually. And unless you show me the rest of the picture, then I could only just kind of imagine what you're talking about when you're talking about this global Earth. So when we move from just this awareness that, okay, if I peeled off the skin of Earth, then, or if I just can see the layer of the top layer of my body as the top layer of Earth, I can put together a lot. I can put together why people have tattoos. Because naturally then those tattoos are markings or engraving on that specific ley line on that person's version of their Earth, right? So they're what you would say is holographic Earth. So a person's tattoos is their markings on their ley lines of their holographic Earth. Okay. And this will let you know a little bit more about the design. The design supports everyone gets their own, even though they have in many ways an exact identical version, like a copy, like a real blockchain, right? DNA is really the blockchain. It's backing up all of everybody's memories onto the chain, but you still have your own private wallet, if you may, in the network. But everybody can see. And this is another thing, if you would notice, X-ray, when they got to take a picture of you and see the inside of you, even through your clothes, what are they going to use? X-rays, right? So this means that anybody or anything that is residing in the X-ray realm can see right through you. And because we have a vehicle in the X-ray realm, we can see right through people, right? So, you do need to get that body together a little bit more, but those premonitions, that precognition, all that stuff is just coming from X-ray and UV. So the reason why I want to, penetrate it this way, I won't say breaking it down, like we're just going through the small pores and holes of the reality, is so we could bring some facts to what we all know to be going on spiritually. Because spirituality is the truth. It is a factual thing. It's not like a hocus pocus. It's very, very exact.